everyone. I'm Anna Campa, part of the St. Cloud Diocese Communications and Development team. Thank you so much for joining us for Thinking Outside the Festival Box, how to plan a successful parish celebration, build community, and fundraise during the pandemic. Today we'll begin with a prayer, followed by some housekeeping items, and then our presentations with Tommy Rose of Catholic Stewardship Consultants and our three parish presenters. And for now, our opening prayer. Heavenly Father, we come to you asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we explore a variety of opportunities for our parish communities. Help us to listen with open hearts and minds. Give us strength to endure the obstacles before us. Give us wisdom to see the lessons those obstacles contain. Direct our thoughts, words, and actions as we walk your path of peace and love. Continue to remind us that all that we do here is for the pursuit of truth and your greater glory. We ask these things in your name. Amen. Okay, thank you, everyone. I'm going to go over just a few housekeeping tips to get us started. We welcome your participation in this event, and there are a couple of ways in which you can take part. They can be viewed by bringing your cursor to the bottom of your screen. The ones we will be using today are chat, question and answer, or Q&A. The chat function is for making comments or sharing information with the panelists for other attendees. Please note that you can choose who you send your comments to. Question and answer works very much the same way as the chat. Its purpose is to ask questions of the presenters. You can submit questions anytime during the presentations. Please include your name and your parish with your questions, and our moderator, Joe Tawalski, Director of Communications and Development, will direct them to the presenter as time allows. One last note, you can adjust the view to your preference by bringing your cursor to the top right corner of your screen. And we are honored this evening to have Tommy Rose of Catholic Stewardship Consultants. Tommy has been a client manager, digital marketing manager for Catholic Stewardship Consultants for more than 11 years. He oversees annual planning and coordinating of stewardship renewals, conducts parish leadership workshops, administers capital campaigns, and provides general counsel to his parish clients. Thank you for being with us here today, Tommy.
And thank you for having me, and thank you so much, everybody, for coming. I'm going to switch over and share my screen. I do have a little PowerPoint that I'll share with you. Give me just 1 second. Okay. And share. All right, and that should be it. All right. Give me just 1 second. Okay, thinking outside the festival box. I want to thank you all for making time to attend this workshop. This has continued to be a challenging time for all the church. And I know that you all are here because you're seeking ways to help the church and its people. I hope that in our time together, you're going to learn something and be able to take something back to your parish and to the leaders in your parish and the people of your parish that is going to help you as you seek ways to have those parish festivals or parish fundraisers that we typically have this time of year. Now, I want to start just with a little bit more about myself. I think some of you may have remembered me from a previous workshop that we did on digital marketing. So I'm not an expert in any one area, but I sure do know a lot about church life. So that's why they've asked me to come back to share some of the ways that we've experienced what parishes are doing. Some of you might have more in-depth knowledge of how to do a parish festival or fundraiser than I do. And so I think hopefully I will present you some different ideas of ways that you can plan for your festivals. I certainly know that none of us have been preparing for our parish festivals and fundraisers to be so dramatically changed with so many COVID restrictions. But after 15 years of working with parishes, I know a lot about planning for parish activities. So I hope that you can use this as a starting point as you go back to your parishes and you start thinking about what's going to be happening over the next several months and into the summer and into the fall as you do those various things that you'll have. Much of what I'm going to talk about is the pre-planning stages and then executing plans to help people connect with one another and to build community through your parish fundraisers and through your parish festivals. I had planned originally to talk a lot more about some of the things that the parishes we're working with, the Catholic Stewardship Consultants, have done. But as I started to read more about the 3 parish presenters that you're going to hear from, I really want them to share more of their stories. And frankly, some of them have done as good, if not better, than many of the parishes that we're working with. So I'm really excited for you to hear about what others in your diocese are doing. It's really impressive, the things that they're doing. So I've got a lot to get to, and I'll try to move through it pretty quickly so that we make time for the parish presenters. And you don't need to worry about making notes. I'm pretty sure this is going to be recorded, and I'm also going to make this PowerPoint available to you as well as some of the other things that I'll have in my presentation. So feel free to skip the note taking, and we'll provide that for you. All right, so how to plan a successful parish celebration, build community, and fundraise during COVID restrictions. I know for many of you, and Anna shared with me that this has been a very popular workshop for the diocese. I know many of you have been in the process of doing your budgets for the 2021-22 year. And so you're looking at these fundraisers and some of these parish festivals and the revenues they bring in, and started to ask yourself, what are we going to do if we have shortfalls? How are we going to get through this? And we need to see if there's some ways or some ideas where we can minimize our losses from not being able to have the typical things that we have during the summer because of the restrictions. Now, hopefully, and what I'm really praying, and I know that you all are praying for this, that this workshop will be unnecessary, and that in short time we're going to be able to reopen things and that the COVID restrictions will go away. So that will continue to be our prayer. But I think we still need to plan for the worst and hope for the best. So hopefully you're going to just find a new way of doing things that you want to continue doing. And even, we run into this, it's not uncommon where we have festivals or we have parish events, and even outside of something like COVID, things come up that cause a challenge. So, maybe there's an issue with, building that we used to host our festivals in, or maybe there's just bad weather and it continues to happen. So we need to find other ways that we can circle back to our festival without having to actually have the festival. I think you're going to come up with and see some ways that you can do that through this workshop. All right. So pre-planning. What I wanted to chat to begin with is talk about the pre-planning phases. And I think what you need to do is you sit with your leadership and you talk about what your capabilities are as a parish, is what is possible in our parish. So many parishes are so different. And so, tonight you'll hear from a couple parishes, and as you're listening to what they do, you might say to yourself, we could never do anything like that. Maybe it's because of the parish. Maybe you just don't have a lot of technology. Maybe you just hasn't been something that you've been able to invest in. Or perhaps the people in your parish aren't really those who use a lot of the technologies or the kinds of things that we might be talking about. So there may be some things that you just simply can't do. I think, especially in more rural areas where you just don't have, the internet connections that, go out into the farms, or, perhaps you just got, more antiquated setups. There are some of these, maybe the online things or the streaming kinds of things that you're not going to be able to do. So I think you have to take that into account as you're doing your planning for your events. Technology and communications are a challenge for many rural areas. So there are certain things that you want to be able to do, but you're not going to be able to do. At the same time, maybe now's the time that you really do engage with those technologies and really engage people in doing that. I think it's been a good season in our church from that standpoint to be able to communicate with people in a much stronger way using these communications. In fact, Catholic Stewardship Consultants, we travel a lot to go visit with the parishes that we're working with. And it's been kind of nice. We're actually able now to not have to travel as much because we're doing so much with video meetings. So I think hopefully you all are seeing that in your parishes as well. And perhaps you'll be able to do more with the technology and your people will be able to do that. As you're looking at your events and as you're thinking about the events that you've done in the past, you want to start with what is the most popular element of your event. That's typically going to be what draws people in the most as you start your event. So, perhaps as you're talking, maybe you do a big dinner, and the big dinner is the big event for you. How can we incorporate that into what we're going to try to do as we carry out this alternate type of parish fundraiser? And so, but you need to find out from the people what is the most popular element of your event. I think sometimes we make assumptions about what that is, but as we poll the people, we might be surprised to really find out that they really like other things that we just didn't realize they like. So what I encourage you to do is do some type of survey. They're very easy to do. If you have any experience, I mean, so many people have Gmail, or you probably know somebody who has Gmail. They have something called Google Forms. It's very simple to use. You go in there and you can, put in some questions. You can ask people and just get an idea of where people are at and what they really would like to see as you're doing that pre-planning. And then you want to attempt to meet those needs. So again, if they really like, the parish dinner, well, we can't get everybody together for the dinner, but what we're going to do is make those dinners available over a 4-weekend period where we have a meal each weekend that people can come and purchase and pick up at the parish, through some type of drive-through. Maybe that's what you want to do. But sometimes the most popular events aren't particularly profitable. So again, that's something else to consider. I've worked with many parishes who put a lot of time, energy, and effort into an event, and they really are focused on the community gathering. And so from that element, it's really good, but they find that it's not particularly profitable. As you are looking at your alternate approach to your parish fundraisers or your parish festivals, you want to take into account how much is this going to cost us and how much profit will we actually make if we go down that road. And as you find that, even though it's the popular thing, it's just not as profitable. So in this context, we need to look a different way at how we're going to do our fundraiser. So, what is the most profitable element of your event? So again, take in that cost versus profit, things like raffle tickets. Typically, those are very inexpensive to print. They're easy to distribute, and you can, I've seen raffle tickets go as little as $5 to as much as $200, depending on what the prize is. So those are the kind of things that you look at and you go, okay, this is going to be more profitable because it's so cost effective. So that's something else that you'll want to have those discussions about as you approach how exactly are we going to move forward in these alternate approaches. So after you discern that information, you're ready to move forward. You really need to start with being creative. Get creative in your approach. Now, again, every community is different. Every community's abilities are different. So as we go through the various examples that we're going to provide, don't look at it and go, oh, yeah, we're going to do that. You've got to stop and say to yourself, okay, is this even something we can do? Or you might say, I really like that idea, or we really like that idea, but we're going to have to adjust it. So be creative in how you approach it. Unfortunately, there are very few simple answers. I think that, and you'll hear this from the parish presenters, that they worked really hard and there was no easy way to carry out what they ended up doing in 2020 in place of their usual parish festivals or parish fundraisers. So you're going to have to put in some work, and it's not going to be easy. I tell people all the time, if there were simple answers to the problems in the church, and I knew those answers, I wouldn't be talking to you from Augusta, Georgia. I'd be talking to you from my beach house down in Miami Beach with all my millions of dollars if I knew the simple way to change things in our church. But use the creative ideas of parishioners And one thing too is get new blood on the committees. So often we see that parishes have the same folks on the committees. Sometimes it is that it's the only people that we can wrangle into doing this. And so we just have to thank them and be okay with what they've come up with. But it's good to get new blood on the committees, get parishioners who are maybe new to the parish, who have had experiences outside at other parishes, get some of the younger folks, make sure you've got, married couples on your committees, you've got singles, you've got older folks on your committees. Make sure you've got a good, well-rounded group, and get those new folks on there to bring some new ideas. And another thing that we may want to consider is discontinue that "we've always done it this way" approach. I've been around Minnesota and North Dakota enough, and I feel it's safe to say, and hopefully nobody will hate me for saying this, but all you Germans are very stubborn people, and certainly I know that to be true. Although once you get to know strangers, you're amongst the most hospitable people I've ever met. But you might want to think about changing it, because it's move away from "we've always done it this way," and so that's what we're going to continue to do. So think about new ideas. I think you'll pick up some new ideas tonight. Try things. Don't be afraid to fail. It's okay to fail. Again, we're doing the work of the Lord, and even if we fail because He wanted us to fail, not because of our desire to not do well. Set your goals as you're doing your planning. Be clear in what you need to do. So set the amount that you've hoped for. And be clear as to why you're trying to get that, so that you've got a good idea of, this is how much it's going to cost us to do this particular type of event or type of approach. This is how much we can expect to profit. How much will that leave us, for what we've set the goal for? And can we get to that point? And if you can't get to that point based on your numbers, you might need to make some adjustments. Make sure and you have clear understanding of what will be done with the revenues collected. You want to be sure that you're clear on what we're going to do with this, because sometimes you can even look at it and go, gosh, maybe if we make some adjustments on what we're going to do with this, we don't have to raise quite as much money, and perhaps that will reduce the needs of what we're trying to accomplish, and might be a little bit easier. Ensure that your goals are in line with the parish mission. We want to be sure that everything we do is in line with what the mission of our parish is. Are they helping to grow the community? Are they helping to strengthen our parish? What's that parish mission? And do our goals, are they in line with that mission? And then plan to communicate those goals with the whole parish, connecting them with the spiritual purpose. People are much more motivated to participate in something when they can clearly see how that connects to the spirituality of a parish, and how that connects with their relationship with Christ. If it's just, and all they read into it is, oh, this is just a way for the parish to raise money, that is less of incentive, as when you're really talking about what the goals are, what we're hoping to do with money. Perhaps it's, for some of you, maybe your parish festivals are, things that you use to pay your employees. And those employees are integral to the ongoings of the parish and everything that we try to do. So communicate that. Perhaps it's something that provides, on a regular basis, new technology for the kids at the school. And with that new technology, the kids are better able to learn, and for those Catholic schools are to be able to be better disciples of Christ. So connecting that with that spiritual purpose is an important element of that communication. So you want to do those things through your planning. And then as it relates to communication, I wanted to touch on what we see most of the parishes. And I don't think this will be new for many of you, but I do want to touch on the things that's important to ensure that we're using to communicate. So certainly we want to use our bulletins. I think, through COVID, bulletins are still being viewed, but probably not as much as they used to be. So if you have a vehicle to send out your bulletins, especially electronically, be using those. Mailings, specifically newsletters and letters, it's okay. And I would even encourage you, maybe you don't do a parish newsletter on a regular basis, but maybe you want to create, the Summerfest newsletter, and you put a lot of information about what's going on this year with the Summerfest, and create a little 4-page or a little 8-page newsletter that you can send out to all the households. Mail is still, a really solid way to get things out in people's hands. Same thing, looking at letters. Many parishes will send out, 50 raffle tickets and say, please, purchase some of these on your own and sell them to your coworkers for a raffle. So, mailing those things out instead of having people come by the parish office. If your parish office, you really can't pass those things out, use those letters, send those letters out. And even a pastoral letter, something from the pastor going out to everybody, really encouraging the people, letting them know why we're doing things different this year, and encouraging them to really find ways to participate because we're so much in need of this important activity in our parish. That's a really solid thing that you can do in your parish. Social media, you should blast as much as you can over Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all the things that you use for social media. Come up with those, be creative in how you post on your social media sites, and make sure that you're doing something at least every day, maybe 2 to 3 times per day leading up to that festival. I'd start 2 or 3 weeks in advance and really promote it via social media. We know how strong a tool that continues to be in our country. Email, again, is a critical piece of what we should do. Email is very inexpensive. Things like MailChimp or Constant Contact, for the most part, unless you're in a really large parish. I don't know even if St. Cloud has any parishes that are that large where it wouldn't be for free. So MailChimp and I think both Constant Contact, up to a certain number of emails will not be at any cost. So put something together that you can email out to everybody. And then lastly, phone calls and robocalls. This is especially for perhaps some of our older parishioners who have not yet embraced electronic forms of communication. The phone calls and the robocalls can just be really important and helpful for them to receive a call from the parish, letting them know about what's going on. Especially in the smaller parishes, I think it would be great if you had if you put together a calling committee that on a regular basis was actually picking up the phone, splitting up all the households in the parish and making phone calls and just inviting people to participate in whatever the event is, however you do it, let them know. Those personal contacts are also very much in line with hospitality. It makes people feel important. Somebody called me to let me know about our parish festival or our online auction, whatever you're doing. So maybe take that step this year as we're continuing to come out of COVID, to institute phone calls or the robocalls as something that you utilize on a regular basis for your parish communications. And then lastly, use the local media, newspaper, TV, radio, whatever you have. These are things that the media is interested in. They'll, maybe they'll put it in their announcement section. I know I did a little bit of research. I know the folks up in Little Falls put their raffle in the diocesan magazine, so that was neat to see. But make sure that you're reaching out to those folks. Don't just assume that they're not interested. Reach out and let them know about what you've got going on. All right, so then after we're done with our planning and we're done with our communication, and before I move on to the execution and some of the examples from the parishes we're working with, I just can't emphasize enough that communication is probably and promotion is probably the most important thing that you have to do to have a successful event at your parish. If people don't know about it, they can't participate. So don't just simply put it in the bulletin and hope that people see it. Don't just simply post it to your website and hope that people see it. Really get some folks together who are going to help you to communicate what you have going on in the parish. All right. And so after we do our planning and our communication, then we're ready to execute. So I want to share with you 3 parishes and some of the things that they did. And I think you'll see, I hope that you see in these examples something that you can do. I know the last example you all can do, although I don't want to say it's the best approach, but for those, I know everybody can do the last one. So the first one I want to share with you is Immaculate Conception, and they're in Ohio, just outside of Cleveland. And, Cleveland certainly had a high level of restrictions as the pandemic really began in earnest last year, March and April. And they typically do an Oktoberfest in July. And this is a big, big event. It's a Friday evening, all day Saturday, and I think through early evening on Sunday. They block off the streets. That they have to have police come in and block off the streets. They bring in rides like a carnival. They have food. They have raffles. They have auctions. They have beer. They have dinners. I mean, you name it. This is a really big event. And through this event, they typically raise anywhere between 75 and 100,000. That's typically what they'll bring in. But as you think about all the things that I just discussed, it's very expensive. Their starting costs are high. So even though they make 100,000, their cost might be still 100, 150,000 just to get the thing off the ground. So it's an expensive event that takes a tremendous amount of planning. It's a really good event for the community, though, because so many people who are not Catholic come to the event. So it really gives Immaculate Conception a chance to in some way evangelize to those people in the community. So last year they weren't able to do that. So they made some adjustments for what they were able to do. So the first thing they did was they had their annual Oktoberfest golf tournament. I'm a golfer, and praise God, golf has been fairly restricted or fairly safe from restrictions. I don't think I've known of any of the golf courses, at least not around here, to shut down. I know in Ohio they didn't shut down. So that's probably why I'm still alive to this point, is because I was at least able to get out to the course. But they continued to have their golf tournament. They had to cancel it initially and move it back a little bit. But as they moved it back, they talked about why, and they actually had a better turnout for the golf tournament as they pushed it back. I think probably for you all, that's something that you probably can do as part of whatever you're doing to fundraise. If you've got a golf course in the area, I'm pretty sure most of your golf courses, at least now that the snow has gone up there in Minnesota and the courses are opening, maybe that's something you can do. There's a lot of great information online about how to run a golf tournament. So if that's something of interest, that's something you certainly can do. When they had to cancel the Oktoberfest, they met and they had a discussion about what can we do that is some favorite things from the Oktoberfest. And two of the things that they were able to do was they actually were still able to do the Chinese auction, and they did very well with that. So, if you have any experience with the Chinese auction, that's where you buy a bunch of, less expensive tickets, and then you put more tickets into, the hat of the thing that you really would like to get. So they were able to do a Chinese auction, and that was very successful. And then a little bit later, they did dinners. They're kind of known for the variety of, if you've ever been to Cleveland, it's really a neat area to go. There's a lot of national food. So they went and had every weekend, they had where you could drive through and pick up a food from the event. So I think they did that for 4 weekends. And that was very successful as well. So through that, I think they raised, $65,000 was where they came in. So they didn't quite hit their goal, but they also had very little expenses to deal with. So it was probably in some sense a bit of a relief for so many people who put in so much hard work. They got a little bit of a break that year. I didn't have to put it together. But one of the nice things they did to wrap up was they had a closing outdoor mass, and that was done with the intentions for the Oktoberfest and for a successful 2021 Oktoberfest. So again, they reconnected that with the spiritual element and really had a lot of success. So that's what Immaculate Conception did in Willoughby, and I think probably most of that are things that you all can do at your parishes. The next parish that I wanted to talk about is Christ the King. Now, this is the cathedral in Lexington. So this is interestingly, it's still a neighborhood parish, and so really, even though it's the cathedral, they really have done a lot of things as a community for a long time, and Oktoberfest is something they've done for many, many years. Again, Lexington being a big city, they had a lot of restrictions, so they really had to stop a lot of the things that they were doing. So they made a decision, and what they decided to do was 3 key areas. They had a raffle, and what they raffled off was one of the local car dealers always donated a vehicle that they could raffle. So I think he's a parishioner, and so that's a way that he could support the parish. But this year he went a little bit above and beyond and actually offered them a Chevy Tahoe. And I think for those of you who know Chevy Tahoes are very expensive, so that was quite a gift, and they really had a successful raffle because of that. They also did yard art, and I'll get into a minute about that. And then they also did their 5K and their half marathon a little bit different, and I'll show you to explain that a little bit more. So starting with the raffle, there's that Tahoe. Again, I would say it's probably $60,000 plus. So that's quite a gift. They had posts all over the place. They sent out letters. They put things in their newsletter. They really promoted buy a raffle for this great chance at winning this just incredible vehicle. The next thing they did, which this was one of those very creative things, is you could buy yard art. And what they did was they created these signs that says, "You've been Oktoberfested." And what you could do is go online, pay the sign, quote unquote, fee, and you could have that sign put in one of your friends' yards. Now, what was really neat is as they moved on, every time the next day, and I think they did probably 10 or 15 of these different approaches, 10 or 15 different Oktoberfested signs, is as the next person paid, an additional sign was added to the yard. So that as you went on, if you're the 15th person, you now get 15 signs in your yard. And so each level went up a little bit in cost, and they just had a great time with it. So when people woke up in the morning, they'd wake up to 15 or 20 signs in the yard saying they've been Oktoberfested. So it was kind of a fun way to have fun within the community. And then lastly, they normally did a 5K and a half marathon, and they raised a lot of money. But because they couldn't get everybody together, what they decided to do was have everybody just safely, wherever they were, run their own 5K or run their own half marathon, time it themselves, and then using the honor system, upload their time to online, and then they chose the winners from there. So they still were able to have their 5K, but just with smaller groups, just with families going out. So I think maybe outside of the truck, those other two examples are something that probably any of you all could do. I really like the Oktoberfest, and I think that's really kind of a fun way to have fun with one another. And then the last parish that I want to talk about is St. Vincent de Paul in Nebraska. And they do something every year called a Spring Fest. And, as they sat down as a committee, and they usually do it in March. March, if you recall, in 2020 was when everything hit. And they really just did not have any way that they could do any kind of thing. No raffles, no food delivery. They just really couldn't put anything together. So what they decided to do was the pastor put together a letter and sent it out to everybody with a return envelope. And the letter's really nice, but basically what he said was, he went through why they're not having Spring Fest this year, but he talked about all the great things that Spring Fest does for their community, and just kind of went through the list of how much money has been raised in the past, what they've been able to do with the money, what it has meant to the community. He touched on the various things that they do in that Spring Fest, and he really kind of put it on the people to let them know, we really want to do this, but we just can't do it at this time. And so then what he asked them at the end in that letter is just made an appeal to ask for a monetary gift. And, he sent the enclosed envelope and just asked them to donate whatever they normally would spend at the live event, or what they would do for a dinner ticket and the drinks, whatever it was that they normally kind of set aside for this event, to just maybe consider putting that in, in an envelope and send it in. And, again, talk to them about how much we normally raise in that 70,000, and that was 70,000 for them. I believe they had $85,000 come in through that. So, really they had a great, that was a very simple thing that they did. But I think sometimes we feel like, gosh, can we just ask for money? I think if you do it in the right way and connect it to something that the community really likes to do, and really show that, you as a parish are just as sad as the people are that we can't do this event, this would be appropriate. Now, don't say, oh, that's a great idea, we're just going to do that every year, and then 10 years down the road, you've never had another event, and you just ask people for money with this one simple letter. I think at a point, people will probably be upset about that. But, I think it's a good idea to consider this. If you can't do anything else, let the people know. We talk about this all the time. It's their parish, and you want them to know about where some of the financial things, are at. And so it's important for them to see a letter from you or something that says we still want to try to bring in those revenues because it is important for our community. All right, and then lastly, I just wanted to touch on follow-up before we turn it over for some questions, and then also for the three parish presenters. One important thing that you want to do is report the success of the event. Communicate via the bulletin, mailing, social media, newsletters, email, phone calls, etc. Also notify any sponsors of the success. Let them know how successful your event was and let them know, kind of what happened. I think, that's going to help you next year to go back to them. Be specific, reiterate the goal and how much was actually raised. And I want to also, as you're talking about how much money was raised, if you go over your goal, don't be afraid to let people know you went over the goal. We want to praise our people and thank them for their efforts. But also you want to let them know if there was a shortfall, and don't do it in a way, where, oh, we didn't hit our goal. Do it more from the perspective of thank you so much for all you've done. We had a great turnout. We can't believe how well we did. And even though we didn't hit our goal of say $60,000, that $55,000 is still an amazing gift. And the reason that you want to do that is often large gifts will follow to make up for the shortfalls. I've heard of that numerous times where because of COVID, there was some function that was going on and there was a shortfall. And through just a simple communication, some parishioner stepped forward and said, Father or, leader of the event, we want to make sure that the parish isn't hurting because of what happened with these restrictions. So we want to make up the difference. And then lastly, again, you want to solicit event feedback. Another great way is to find out what participants thought about the event. Again, go back to those Google forms, ask people what they liked, and use that information as you plan your next event. And then tabulate your results and then just communicate that back to your leadership. All right, and with that, I'm going to wrap up. I think there may be some questions, and I'm not sure, if maybe Joe is going to ask that, and then we'll move on after that and hear from the parishes and some of their experiences.
Excellent. Thank you, Tommy, for that presentation. And I would just remind attendees, if you have questions for Tommy, and we have a couple of minutes for questions before we move on to our parish presenters, please put those in the Q&A section, and I'll watch for those and ask Tommy. But we do, here's one question for you. You mentioned early on in your presentation about getting new blood on the committees for new ideas. What are maybe some practical ideas for doing that? I think that's something in theory a lot of parishes want to do, but maybe aren't quite sure how to go about doing that.
Yeah. One of the, where I'd start is, and I would think most of your parishes or your ACCs have this, is start with your parish council. That's a big part of your planning group. And I think sometimes, we sit in our groups and try to think about the people who we could invite, but the parish councils really are there to help guide us. So I think that's certainly one way to go about it. If you have a school, definitely look to the school families. So often they have, they really have a lot of stake in the parish. And so the teachers or the principal might know a family that's really involved and they would be good to do. The other one is just, via the pastor. I think a lot of times the pastors do know some good people to invite, but don't just do a bulletin announcement and say, we're looking for people to be on the Parish Fest committee. Bring up specific people and then have them specifically invited. Even if you're a little concerned about, will they actually say yes, maybe ask your pastor to call and invite them. It's hard to tell the pastor no. So, I always tease people, one of my worst days at my former parish before we changed parishes was the day my pastor called me by name, because I knew then he could ask me to do things. So, if you're concerned about people saying no, or it's been a challenge in the past, maybe invite your pastor to call those people and invite them to be a part of the committee.
Excellent. Thank you. And maybe one more question here before we move on. How can you leverage an alternate festival or an online event as a step toward reigniting parish life and faith life coming out of COVID. Is that something you can do with one of these events?
I think it's tricky, but it can be done. I think kind of circling back to the Oktoberfested sign idea. When you do something like that and you see those faces, those two kids, if you don't know them, you're going to try to find out. Or if you don't know that lady standing in front with the 15 signs, I think these alternative events where you get to see the people. One example of a parish here in Augusta, St. Mary on the Hill, they do a big event with their school. And one of the big things for that's part of it is they kind of have the field day with the kids at the school. So what they did this year was they pre-recorded the classes, doing the sack race or the three-legged race, and then people could go online and watch that. I think whatever your alternate event is, whatever way you can show the faces of people, try your best to say who they are. I think that can help reconnect folks. I think you can also re-engage people who you haven't seen, heard from in a while. So, there's ways to do that. You have to be very careful in how you do that, but also making those personal invitations. Maybe you say, we're going to go through our roster and look at, the folks that we can't tell that they've given anything in the last year. And we're going to specifically invite them to whatever this event is. The point is not mentioning of certainly, please don't mention that that's how you got their name if they haven't given anything in the last year. But those might be people who aren't engaged. Maybe start with that group, and those are some of the groups that you're going to call personally to invite to be a part of whatever that event is that you decide to do.
Thank you. Actually, we're going to do maybe one more question. I have a question here from one of our pastors, Father Greg Paffel. What is and this might not be a short answer, so maybe you could try to give the short answer and we can come back around to this when we have more time for questions at the end. But what is the relationship between tithing and fundraising?
Right. So, and I'll bring that up if we have some time in the closing, but really, we like to talk about tithing, but more in the context of stewardship. I know many of you have come to a previous thing where we've talked more about stewardship, but again, that's the idea of time, talent, and treasure. One of the things that we see in parishes that really understand and practice stewardship, not just stewardship as giving, but stewardship holistically, is that the tithe or the gift of treasure becomes more important to parish households. And what you end up seeing, and I think most of you would probably like to see this happen in your parish, where your parish festivals or your parish fundraisers are used as community building events, and it's not so important for the funds that are made from them. But that can't happen until you get people really understanding the idea of the stewardship of treasure or the tithe. And that 10%, I think we would all agree if we could get our parishioners even into the 5% range, a tithe of 5%, we wouldn't even need to do fundraisers. We'd have plenty of money for the things that we need to do. And therefore, our fundraisers would really be more about community and less concern related to raising money. But it really has to start holistically. That really should be a long-term goal and a long-term plan. I think that's something that, for you pastors that are on the line, or for, parish councils, how do we start to really instill this idea of gratitude? Kind of circling back to the parish in Nebraska, when he sent out that letter, they've been working at stewardship, I think, for about 4 or 5 years. And the pastor really shared that that's probably why he had such a strong response to that letter. Was he really challenged them to be good stewards and to not keep whatever that money was that they would normally put towards their Spring Fest, but to consider thanking God by giving that gift back to the parish. So really connected with stewardship, specifically stewardship of treasure. And that is how, fundraisers become less about raising money and more about community building.
All right, thanks, Tommy. We'll come back to some more questions at the end, but I'm going to turn it over back to Anna, and she'll take us, move us forward with our parish presenters.
Uh, Thank you, Joe, and thank you so much, Tommy. Tommy will be staying with us through the end of this webinar to provide some feedback and answer any additional questions you may have. But now I'm happy to introduce Melissa Anderson. Melissa is Parish Business Administrator for St. Andrew's Parish in Elk River, and she has some exciting things to share about fundraising events for St. Andrew's Parish and School. So thank you, Melissa.
Hi, thank you. It's nice to be on. I'm going to introduce my cohort here. Jackie Sadowski has been a lifelong member here at St. Andrews and has been an integral part of helping St. Andrew the last many years for our festival. And we brought her on this year to help with our gala also. So she's here. So we are actually on our third event this year. This weekend, we have our second gala. Will be virtual again this year, and that's on this Friday night. So for our galas, we usually do a presentation and a live or an auction or a silent auction then during the event. The presentation is really helpful in promoting our school. It promotes what the kids have done in this last year. And this year we are actually highlighting some of our alumni too for the school. So that's kind of what we do for that. For the festival, we did do the raffle the last year, and we plan on doing it this year again if we have to be virtual. And then we also do a silent auction, and the silent auction we had set it up outside last year, just as we would have set it up any other year, and had it decorated the tents, and people could come and walk around the tents and look at the items. One thing we did do differently, because how do you reach out to the people? We had our groups, like our CCW groups, our social justice groups, Knights of Columbus. They all put together the baskets for the silent auction. And I think we learned a little bit of that from our school, because when we got shut down last year for our school gala, all we had was the baskets that the classrooms put together. So by using our groups, it got our groups to communicate to each other because they couldn't meet, and this way then they could be participants in our festival. Another thing that we did, if we're backing up, we promoted the festival as we would have promoted the festival any other year. Jackie and I went up to the pulpit. We had our little song and dance show after the announcements, and just promoted the festival. And that's how we solicited some items for the silent auction, and also then promoted and the raffle. Our raffle, we usually get our sponsors to put up the purse for the raffle, and then we were able to mail out the tickets last year, and then people dropped them off in our front door. So that went really well. We did do a live Facebook Live event then when we had the drawing, so that went over really well. And
well, and this year we had everybody bid on the auction items online. So we had a greater giving platform that they were able to, and that actually was very successful because people did. So when we set up, like Melissa said, we set up all the silent auction items out as if we were having the festival anyway. So it was outdoors. So after mass, they came out and perused and looked at everything. Then they could
get out their cell phone,
get out their phones, and then they could bid, and they were able to take a look and leave, and then they could bid on it till it closed. You didn't have to stay at the festival or at the auction until closing time, but you had your phone and you could bid till closing time, and people like that. And we did have bidding wars going right on to the end. So that was very, very well received last year.
Yeah, and then with the platform that we use, we just, the the next morning, we said, okay, charge everybody that was the highest bid. It charged it. Nobody had to come in, make a payment. We gathered the stuff, and then we socially distanced, handing out the
Right,
items.
so when the auction ended, and if you're not familiar with this, so when it ends, that the service just shuts down, then it sends an email out to everybody who had the winning bid, so they know who won. And like Melissa said, the Monday morning, the system just goes in and charges everybody's cards, and you get a receipt and you're good. That's it. So then they just had to come in and pick things up.
Yeah.
As it worked out. So that was really much more successful than we even thought it would be.
Yeah.
People really liked that.
And one thing is, there's many of those platforms. I was just bidding on Wadina's Spring Fest this last weekend. I was bidding on some items as I was heading to the airport, I think. So it'd be nice too if anybody, the whole diocese or anybody, you can send it out to grandma or grandpa. Anybody can bid on it, on baskets. So that's what's so nice about it too.
Well, we really did make a plea for things as much last year, even though it was virtual, than we've always did. So we always make a big deal out of it. We have a kickoff weekend. We make a big deal about it there. They hear from us all the time. So, and you guys do email blasts from the parish.
Yep, email blast, Facebook page. This was what really cute. This last weekend, we had the kids from 2nd grade and 1st grade were promoting the gala. So Father let them come up and do the little 1-minute talk and to promote the gala. And I think that really helped get the word out. But yeah, with website, Facebook, email blasts, all that kind of stuff. And now that masses are recorded or live streamed, just get an announcement on that too. People can see those announcements on there. So that's all. If I can I'll send out the link and you guys can get
so the
on.
gala's on Friday, starts at 6:30. So yes, feel free to join in and make a bid.
Yeah, and one of the things is promoting the school. The gala is right now is promoting the school, and like I said, we have waiting lists for the first time for our school. So people are seeing what we're doing.
That is amazing. Thank you so much, Melissa and Jackie. You did a great job. Thank you. Now I would like to introduce Marlene Dingman. And Marlene is a member of St. James Parish in Jacobs Prairie, and she will share how St. James successfully reimagined their summer events. So welcome, Marlene.
Thank you. Yes, I'm from Jacobs Prairie. We're the 2nd oldest parish in the diocese. And we are part of the Centered on Christ Catholic community, which is including Cold Spring, Richmond, and Rockville. Normally, we're a small parish. We have around 140 households, so it's very small. Most of us have been here all of our lives. We hold generally, we don't require a lot of expenses because we don't have a school attached to us. But we generally have a summer bazaar, which is your usual summer bazaar with breakfast and raffle and quilt raffle and all of that. And then in 1986, our men's society came up with this idea of having a pork chop and corn on the cob feed. And the theory behind it, the reason they wanted to do it was our cemetery was needing some repairs. And as I said earlier, we are a very old parish, so we want to keep that cemetery up. I mean, we've got people that fought with Napoleon in that cemetery, so we want to keep it looking good. So every August, we have a pork chop and corn on the cob feed. Now that first year, 1986, I think they raised $1,000. Okay, so after the cemetery repairs were made and we put money aside in an account to maintain the cemetery in case we're closed, it just became such an event that we didn't want to let it go. So, and when we first started, our farmers would donate the corn, would grow and donate the corn. And we would go out at very early hours and pick the corn and clean the corn and then cook the corn and serve it. And then in 1999, we decided that's just too much to ask. So we started buying the corn. So fast forward now to 2020, the bazaar didn't happen in June, and we were really missing that sense of community. I mean, the pork chop feed doesn't make a lot of money, but it's a sense of community, and people enjoy the event. I mean, we start in the morning at 9 o'clock cleaning, and we've actually gotten new members join our parish because they were driving by on the road and see us all standing around the big trailer cleaning 400 dozen ear of corn, because that's what we order normally. And so it's a good event for community building. And I was hearing lots of people were going to miss the pork chop feed and the corn in particular. And I've said for years that they were coming for the corn, not necessarily the pork chops. And so when I called the vendor that we work with, who has taken very good care of us over the years, he said, you know, you can do what you want, but how about maybe just selling the corn? And it's like, I like that idea. So I brought it back to the parish council and everyone said yes. So then I went ahead and started promoting the event. And the biggest thing, the hardest thing about it was I didn't want to put a price on it too soon, because I've been doing this for so long. I know that there's generally a huge price drop. Like the year before, I think 3 days before the event, we were at $7 a dozen. And the day of the event, they dropped down to $3.50 a dozen. So I didn't want to lock us into a price and scare people away. I'd rather sell more corn for less money. So we ended up going through 400 dozen. We did call ahead orders. So they called me and placed their order. And I promoted it. The diocese put it on their calendar. I did the 2 local newspapers. I sent out announcements to the local parishes to put in their bulletins. We put it on our website, and I put it on, had people put it on Facebook. I made posters and plastered them all over the local towns. And our priests announced it at the masses. And then I made a sign for our road, which is a very busy road right past our church. So the event was a huge success. People drove up, you know, they knew they were getting their corn. We had it all, you know, bagged up already for them. So they drove up and we just handed it to them. And we got a lot of good feedback about, you know, we hope you're back next year because we sure love this event. We want it back. And the funny thing is, in looking at our history book, that first pork chop feed made $1,000. Just my little corn sale made $881. So, and that's 34 years later. So people love the event, and it was just a way for us to have some community again. So I guess that's all I have. A little corn feed out in the country.
Marlene, what a wonderful way to keep the spirit of your event alive. That just sounds so fun and so innovative. So thank you very much. I would like to introduce now for you Stephen Andres. Stephen is a member of St. Michael's Parish in Buckman, and he will be talking to us this evening about a fundraiser event to support Holy Trinity Catholic School. So welcome, Stephen.
Thank you for having me. I hope everyone's having a good evening. So I, as Anna said, I am here from Holy Trinity Catholic School in Pierce. And our big event is our steak and wine auction and live event that takes place every October. It is by far the largest fundraiser for our small Catholic school in Pierce, where we have roughly 180 students. So I just kind of want to walk you through this a little bit in stages. I thought it would be nice to know what our event normally looks like. We typically feed in a seated meal. It's steak and wine, so you buy your ticket. Roughly 180 people in our small intimate venue. The key to our event is the live auction. So we need those proper donors in the chairs that night. We typically live auction off roughly 50 items that evening, and then through other series of games, split the pots, and other small raffles, we typically raise that night anywhere from $80,000 to $95,000. So it is a huge fundraiser for our school. And as everyone's been mentioning, the big piece of this puzzle is the community building aspect of it, and just the ability to get everyone together and get rallied around the school. So obviously when COVID hit, we made the very difficult decision, even though the event is held off-site, that it just wasn't the wisest thing to do and not the right thing to attach the school to. So we made the decision to transition to completely online. We utilized a platform called Givergy that I was able to find online, and then through some connections, did some research on it. So the event went solely online, and what we focused on within our group were the key components of trying to replicate and duplicate those things that we didn't really want to miss. So obviously the fundraising portion is a big piece of that, large budgeted item for the school. But most importantly, that ability to get the community rallied around this exciting event, which typically is a very quickly sold out event. So what we were able to do is still generate our same amount of sponsors, and we were able to highlight them on the giving website, or Givergy website, which was dedicated directly to the school. What is normally 50 live auction items very quickly turned into closer to 75. So what we found was that we could split items up, and we put them all online. So in a complete visual format, you could see the item with full description, sizes, but it was completely virtual and completely online. It also had components allowing people to just straight donate. And what we found was that people were extremely generous in this time. I think at that time, especially in October, many of us were cooped up. They were really needing something to do. So donations were also very live. One of our biggest discussion points was how were we going to make sure when our online auction closed that Saturday evening at 9 o'clock, how were we going to make sure we really could drive home these items? So we were able to strategically set up and promote house parties as people were comfortable. So we were able to do small groups of 10 to 15 or whatever people felt they were comfortable with at that time. Obviously, a lot of small families and connected families were able to get together. And we set up a series of 6 to 10 live house parties where we probably had more of a captive audience that night than we normally would. And so that was really key that evening. As it related to our auction items, we actually turned on all but 5 of our live auction items for 2 solid weeks. So what we found is that everyone was excited about the bidding process. I think people like online auctions. People were concerned about our older demographic and whether or not they would be able to get involved. And that gave us some time to have people help them and get set up for it. Our platform did give automated outbid notices. So if you had the winning bid and someone outbid you, you would get an immediate text, an immediate email saying you've been outbid. And oftentimes it would tell you who it was. So there was a competitive rivalry there that helped to drive our item values up as well, and just completely shattered our expectations. So that was for 2 weeks leading up to the event. That evening, we did our same 1 hour, well, in this case, shorter, but same event live at the same facility with just a small group of us. We were able to utilize our platform in a way that we could show it on the screen and do it on YouTube Live. And it showed exactly what people were bidding. It showed what items we're going for. And then we live auctioned off our 5 primary events. So, or items, things like a weekend getaway up on the coast, up by Duluth on Lake Superior, and some other farm-based rentals and things that typically our parishioners are very, very generous about donating. Those items were able to go live and go for just as much or more than they typically would. So we did live auction during that hour for those 5 events. And then that all led up to our closing time, which is 9 o'clock, where our roughly 75 items just went on a complete crazy run of bids. I believe that evening when we got in the room around 6, we had roughly a $40,000 total on that auction, which that system is automatically tabulating for us. And when we closed that evening, we were over well north of $100,000. The last piece of this puzzle for that evening was the donation component. So either people that couldn't bid or didn't get the items they wanted. We had so many engaged people. I would say typically in that room on a normal year, we would have 250 engaged people in a room bidding and obviously socializing. But what we found is that we probably had even more. And that kind of transitions me into what we really learned here. So we learned we could actually involve more people over a longer length of time. So as I mentioned, that 2-week lead up of auction items really got everybody talking about the school, got everybody talking about how people could give back to the school and the things that we really were missing because we couldn't connect. A big piece of that puzzle was unique donors. We had people bidding on items that would never normally step foot in our actual event. So people from out of state, whether it be alumni, in complete age range, maybe non-Catholic or non-school attending families, were all bidding. So it really rallied the community, small community, obviously, or the communities that support our school, was very, very positive. As I mentioned, we really found that it enhanced our auction values and items and allowed the people that a lot of these items are handmade pieces, a lot of them are donated. It really allowed us to really support and shout out the people that for years have continued to give and give and give to our fundraiser. And then the last piece of the puzzle here that I wanted to mention is kind of what we learned for what it might look like for us here in 2021. We'll be planning for our October event, and we really, really hope we can be back in person for all the reasons that everyone was listing, obviously the community piece. But we're pretty certain at this point that this has kind of pivoted our event, both from a financial aspect and the way that we can wrap the community in a more modern way. We're pretty certain that we're going to be running it as a hybrid event where we take a portion of our typically jam-packed live auction, which does get long and loud, to online, where we can basically do what we did last year, but do it in the same setting where we still can get people together. So we see a lot of benefits in really driving home development for our school and awareness for the school, which really needs it, and also making sure we can maintain that fund balance. And then the last pieces of information that we've been talking, or some others have mentioned, the platforms. We were able to utilize the cost we spent on this platform to also kind of inject a good, strong electronic backbone into the school on ways that we can collect funds electronically. So we were able to, through the same platform, set up an annual giving page. So if we do have alumni or donators that want to donate, that they have an easy electronic and mobile way to do that. We also utilized it for our school marathon, which is another huge fundraiser for us. We were able to set up individual student pages. So if grandma or grandpa or aunts and uncles that are not local, are not able to get money sent physically, they can do that electronically. And then we also utilize the exact same system for our school carnival, which was a good success for us, even though once again, we could not meet in person. So that electronic platform has proven to be golden for us, and really, really, really worked well. So that is our little event in Piers. So that, I think, is all I have.
Well, thank you so much, Stephen. What a wonderful way to build community and support your school. So kudos to you. Right now, I'd like to ask if anybody has any additional questions for any of our presenters to please forward them now. You can do that in the question and answer.
We have a number of questions that have come in. I'm going to try to get to as many of these as possible, and I might wrap some similar ones together. But here's a question related to, and this is could be for anybody, related to the auction platform. The question is, our silent auction is very popular, but we are a small parish and we are not sure that the cost of an online auction would justify doing the event. What is the cost versus income to make it worthwhile?
Joel, I can speak to that quick as it related to our platform. We spent $24.95 or just under $2,500 when we bought it for a year. This is Steve, by the way. I suppose I could share my video. I actually just reached out to them to renew, because we'll have to renew come up here in August. They have a promo going through May for $1,500. So there is a substantial cost there, obviously. But as I mentioned, I cannot stress enough, and maybe Melissa can reiterate this, that we made up the money without even try. I mean, it was super easy to make that money up. The items that we've sold historically sold for much, much, much more, because we were able to drive it for a longer window of time, and because we were able to attract people and bidders that normally wouldn't be there. So I would strongly suggest it and say that it can absolutely be worthwhile if you can get the word out there and get it in everyone's hands.
Melissa, I think you might be muted.
There. Now, how's that? I agree with Stephen. It's we use Greater Giving, and that was $1,995. So by using it over two events, we kind of split the difference with the different events. But also it generates the receipts and all the thank you letters and all that kind of stuff after the fact too. So it's just push a button and go. I do know there's some platforms, if you only have like 20 items, it's free. I know Christ Our Light in Princeton uses one that isn't that expensive. So you can find them out there in a lot of different avenues. So.
Thanks. I notice a couple people are putting some web links to resources in the Q&A. If you could put those in the chat, that way everybody who's participating will be able to see them. So I'll just ask you, if you put a resource link in the Q&A, please put that in the chat. Here's a question. This is for anybody or maybe everybody. What's the one best piece of advice you can give someone doing an alternative or online event, whether it's a fundraiser or a festival, for the first time? The one best piece of advice to them.
I think for us, it was just being confident in what we had. So we knew that no matter what happened, both financially or meeting wise, that this was the best we could do, and the school needed it, and the community needed it, and it was going to be what it was going to be, and that's what it was going to be. And we just had faith that it was going to work out, and it was better than nothing. And that's what that was truly the approach we took, forging into it.
I agree, and we discussed a little bit prior to. It's still a lot of work to put something like this on, and one of the things that we noticed last year is we don't have a lot of the overhead. So yeah, our festival is actually probably more profitable. So.
All right. Anybody else on that one? Or I'll go to the next question I have here. I'll do that. So I have a question from one of our attendees. What is an effective method of gathering parishioners' occupations, thus identifying what they may be interested in or skilled in and donating or helping with? How do you get that information?
If I could jump in, I think first place to start is typically the back of the bulletin. You know, those folks that advertise in the bulletin often are folks who are already generous and are looking to be involved in the parish. And again, I circle back to utilizing your parish council. The parish council is typically folks who are very well tied into your community. And if you lean on them, you know, from the perspective of this is what we're looking for, this is what we're trying to do, can you all through your avenues in the parish council maybe provide us with some folks that we can reach out to? I think you'd be surprised how often the parish council really can get you a lot of what you need.
Thank you. Here's a question, and if you all could weigh in on this one, that would be great. So thinking about everything you've done over the course of the last year for these fundraisers and these events and these fundraisers, what is one thing you learned from this experience, even when you might return to a more traditional festival type event, that you'll include in your planning and execution, or something you'll just do differently now going forward because it was so effective? What's sort of the big lesson you learned from what you did that you're going to carry forward?
We will probably always use the online platform for silent auction, because people, like I said, I was bidding on events or items from Wadena. I mean, anybody can bid on the items, and it kind of gets a more farther outreach.
And you don't have to be here all day,
right,
to wait for the end of the auction. So you can just keep an eye on your item. So yeah, you get a better, your audience is more attentive longer.
So that's one we'll probably have that all the time until something new comes around.
Yeah, I would, same exact story for us. And the length of time was key for us. So our platform strongly encouraged us to use a longer window of time. So that 2-week window was really big in just tons more awareness, because people were talking about how exciting it was to be able to outbid people and support the school over a longer window of time.
And Marlene, would you like to weigh in on this one?
Well, I'm curious about the online stuff, because this year, of course, with our festival being in June, again, it's been canceled. So we're talking about doing a hybrid of the two events. Now, with a parish so small as ours, my concern is our workforce. So, because like, for example, the woman that runs the silent auction at the bazaar is a key person on the serving line. And I forgot to mention, our little parish will serve anywhere from 800 to 1,200 people at our pork chop feed. So I really do need all hands on deck. So that online auction thing for our silent auction part of it, because if we're going to tie that in to the pork chop feed, I think that's going to be the way to go on that, rather than tying up. And like you said, then it's a longer amount of time we could put into that. So I'm going to do more investigating into that. So.
Great, thanks, Marlene. Got another question here. I think this is directed at our auction folks here. Did you need to just take pictures to post on silent auction?
Yes. So we took pictures and also used stock images depending on the item. Description was really big, since in many cases for us, people couldn't see it. So if it was a quilt, the size of the quilt, what type of quilt it was, you could see the colors, but we tried to include as much description as we possibly could. But we either took them or took stock images and then uploaded them. So our system allowed for 3 images. So if it was a larger basket or item, we tried to split things up as well, so you could really see what you were bidding on. But in this case, for ours, super simple. If you can attach a document to an email, that was basically what it was. You attached the image, typed in a description, and then you could shuffle them around and make them go live from there.
Yeah, same here. Same difference here. You took pictures. We actually encouraged the different groups not to pretty wrap their packages into whatever, so that we could spread it out and so that people could actually see what's in the basket. So if anybody wants to go to st-andrew.net, they can pull up you can view our items to see how it is being promoted right now. It's open for preview. So just find our school gala and click on it and you can take a look.
Yeah, and I believe they're going to share our website, our Steak and Wine website as well. Even though it's complete, you can view all of the items and see the look and feel of the site. Is still there, and it has the big total right through the center of the web page. So it's kind of neat. You can kind of see that build up over time as well.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Melissa. We've got time for one more question, and here it is. What would you say to parishes who have a good idea, but who are hesitant or even afraid to try it?
I think, as the other presenter said, you really have nothing to lose. I mean, unless you try it, you're not going to know if it works or not. And my favorite saying is, there's more than one way to put a sandwich on a tray. It's sometimes we get so locked into doing things the same way, parking in the same spot at church, sitting in the same pew. You got to branch out a little bit and try things. Like, we used to serve baked potatoes. And then I worried about our people down in the basement. It got to be 120 degrees and we've got corn and, bread. It's like, how much more starch do we need? So we went to potato salad, which makes more sense when it's 95 degrees in August anyway. So you have to try. You're not going to know until you try.
Well said. Well, thank you. And I think we've run through all the questions that I have here. So I'm going to turn it back over to Anna just for the final part of our webinar here tonight.
Hello. Well, first of all, thank you so much to everyone for joining us this evening. I want you to know that you will receive an email after this event that has a link to the recording of this event and also some helpful resources for you. I'm also going to leave the prayer up for a little bit after we do that. So if you need time to look up anything that you saw in the chat that you wanted to write down, that you can do that. So let's get ourselves centered in a place for prayer while I get our screensaver up.
Anna, maybe do we want to maybe just, I think we have maybe just a few minutes here. We could circle back to Tommy, maybe just for some summation of kind of what he heard from the parishes. I think we'd have a little time for that. And anything you want to add before the final prayer, Tommy?
Yeah, well, again, and you all know, I work for Catholic Stewardship Consultants, and I want to just stress again what stewardship and what we've seen stewardship do in parishes. And over the years, the parishes that we've worked with, and specifically, I can remember at St. Mary on the Hill here in Augusta, and they've been working on stewardship since the mid-90s, is that everything becomes about community building and not about fundraising. And I think that there are, certainly there are stresses that come to leadership. There are stresses that come on pastors for, bringing in revenues. And we all want to see a transition away from that to where we do have, again, would we want all the money in the world? Sure, but just enough of those revenues to operate our parish. And specifically, Monsignor Costigan was the pastor, and he and I were chatting one time, and they do a big annual event with the school, and it's a lot of work and it's very expensive to do, and they would raise money. And I was talking to him one time, and I said, I know this is a lot of work. What do you think about it? And he said, Tommy, he said, this is one of the best things we do all year long. And even if we lost money doing this event, we would still do it, because the relationships that are built, the faces I see, the children, us all gathered as a family makes it all worth it. And so I think that, really we want to see, and you notice even in the title, we want to start moving as communities from fundraisers to fundraisers. in that it's really about building the community. And even if we don't raise all the money we wanted, even if maybe in some cases we lose money, that we're still glad that we do that. And I think that stewardship is such a strong element of that. I also wanted to circle back to something Marlene said, and I just want to affirm what she said about trying new things. And maybe the priest will yell at me for, they'll call me later and say, Tommy, you're totally theologically wrong. But if I could offer at least a perspective that I've looked at, and I often think about, you know, the servants and the talents, and when they had to make an accounting of themselves, what did you do with the talents that I gave you? You know, we often think about the one that had one talent, and when he goes back, you know, I knew you were, you know, I knew you were a difficult man, so I buried my talent. Here it is back. I'm not sure, and again, maybe I'm reading into this wrong, but I have a feeling that if he came back and he said to the king, I put the talent to work, and unfortunately, I lost it, I think the king might still have said, you good and faithful servant, at least you tried to do something good with the talent that I gave you. So maybe the priest will send me a nasty note later and say, Tommy, you're totally wrong. But I think what the point is that if we're doing things to grow our community, if we're doing things to grow the church, if we're doing things to honor the Lord, even if it fails, he is happy with our efforts. So I think maybe that might be a good way to wrap up, but, you know, to not be afraid of trying new things. You know, we are all in a new world as we continue through, you know, what the COVID restrictions have done in our parish communities. But don't be afraid to try new things. If our efforts are good, if they're supportive of the mission of the church, if the intent is to share our gifts with the Lord, if our intent is to grow the faith in our communities, our efforts are worthy of attempting.
Well said, Tommy. Thank you very much. And now, if you will please join us all in prayer. Gracious God, thank you for blessing us with speakers who are willing to share their experiences with us. May the new opportunities presented fill our minds and hearts with hope. Grant us your grace, Lord God, as we move forward to make decisions for our communities. We ask these things in your name. Amen. Thank you and God bless.